Welcome to the Super Gamer Podcast. Welcome to the new Super Gamer Podcast, episode 143. Our guest this week has played every single licensed NES game. Has actually beaten every single licensed NES game, is a podcast host, a writer, and a retro games and a general geekiness store owner. We have Kelsy Polnik. Thank you for being here.
I'm excited to chat Nintendo with you.
All right. Let's start with, you have not only beaten every single NES game, you've done it on original hardware, you own these games, you did it with no cheats. How long did this take?
Yeah, that's right. I started in October 2011, and I finished on December 2021. But with the big asterisk, there's about a 5-year gap in the middle where I opened my own game store, and I didn't progress the NES playing at all. I took a big break until I sold my store, then I picked it up again. So okay. About 5 years total, even though it took me 10 years to do.
So you no longer own Games Quest?
I don't know. I sold it in 2018, just before the pandemic. Thankfully, I didn't have to operate a business during that time.
Right. Well, that store was a huge hit where you're from. I've read that you actually needed a bigger location, and like 40 customers came to help you out.
Yeah, when we needed to move, just like our patrons came and helped us like throw boxes into trucks and set up the new place. Like we really had a pretty strong community up here.
Cool. Did you know that going in? Were you like, oh yeah, I'm filling a niche that we have here? Or was it just like, this is my passion project, if other people like it, great?
Kind of both. I mostly expected it to be really slow. I knew it would be a niche that my city didn't have, but the niche was much bigger than I thought it would be, and we kind of blew up right away, and it was incredible.
Does that mean, like, have you scaled down your collection at all? I know beyond Nintendo, you have a full games collection of 7,000 games? Yeah,
I need to. Like this year, that's probably going to be my New Year's goal, is to downsize, because it's become unwieldy. And a lot of the prices on things have blown up over the pandemic, and we're feeling a bit of a financial crunch right now. So I'm hoping I can turn some of that into a little bit easier time for my family next year.
Is there anything that, I guess, is there an order you have? Is it like, hey, well, I can get rid of the Xbox stuff first?
That's actually a good call. Xbox has always been one of my least favorites, so that would be easy to part with. But actually, like, I'm thinking NES might be a good one to start with, because now that I've played through everything, I have a really good idea of what I'm going to ever revisit. So I think I can get rid of all the ones that I know I'll never play again.
Fair enough. So speaking of revisiting, you are currently revisiting for, you're researching for a book, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So having played them all, did you go, when you were like, okay, I need to revisit these, were you just dreading any? Were you like, oh, I can't believe I have to play this one again?
No, because I don't have to beat them this time. I just need to like verify some facts and like double check some things for research. So I don't have to sit there for like days, hours, weeks on end with some of these really tough ones and try and get through them again. I just have to make sure I have my facts straight.
And do you ever, let's say you need to like clean the house, are you ever able to be like, oh no, I got to do some research, and then you just play Mega Man?
No, I try and keep on top of the chores first. So I have a pretty strict routine in the morning. So it's like get my kids ready for school, do a quick workout, shower, if dishes or laundry needs to get done, then it's game time after that. I got to make sure my responsibilities are taken care of first.
Do your kids care at all that you've done this and are doing this?
No, I've got one that's 14 and one that's 6. So the 14-year-old can kind of comprehend what's going on. He knows I'm interested in it and really passionate about it, but I don't think he understands the effort it took or anything like that. And I try not to push my stuff on him. I'm more of the mind where I'll come to him where he's at, not try to bring him to where I'm at. So if he wants to talk about Nintendo, which sometimes he does, like when Hero came out in Smash Brothers, he really likes Smash Brothers. He was asking me all sorts of Dragon Quest questions. So I was like, cool, I can talk to you about Dragon Quest for a little bit. And so once in a while we cross paths there, but not too often.
So the original beating of all these games, you say you did it no cheats, but I know that you did use a stair glitch in Ghostbusters. I believe you went back and then did it without.
Yeah, because I was under the assumption that that part was unbeatable without the glitch. And then when I got near the end of the games, I was like, this feels really weird because I didn't have to use a glitch for any other game. So I'm like, I'm going to go back and figure this out. And thankfully I was able to. It took me a few days. I thought it would take longer, actually. But it's a really tough section of the game because of the controls and the huge hitbox of your characters, and the ghosts are all randomized. So it's not something you can do on every run, but if you set yourself up and get a little bit of luck with the ghosts and take it really slow, it's definitely doable.
And kind of related to that, I think it was on the Drunk Friend podcast you mentioned that a lot of going into a lot of games, you'd seen all these like hardest games ever lists, and then so you kind of amp yourself up like, oh, this can't be done, and then you realize like, oh, this is actually pretty easy.
Yeah, actually, really early on, that became apparent. I wasn't initially trying to beat all the games. I was trying to collect them all, and I was like, hey, I should start playing some of these. And I'd beaten about 100, and I said like, hey, let's figure out what the hardest games are and let's see if I can even do them. And so I looked up, top 10 hardest NES game lists and pulled up several of those, wrote them all down. And then some of them that are like, number one hardest game, like Silver Surfer, Battletoads. And some of them I'd already beaten, like Ghosts and Goblins and Ninja Gaiden. I'd beaten those already. So when I sat down with like Silver Surfer, I was like, oh man, it's going to be, months to figure this out. And the very next day I had it beaten. And I was like, wow, that wasn't so bad. And then as I got further into the library, I'm like, there's all these games that are so much harder than everything that's on these top 10s, but nobody talks about them because they're just not, beloved childhood classics, or AVGN didn't do a video on them. They haven't become like some kind of meme. So there are so many harder NES games than the ones that people normally associate with the hardest NES games.
What do you think is the hardest NES game?
It's going to vary from person to person. Like if you play a lot of shoot 'em ups, maybe those won't be as hard. But I find some of the shoot 'em ups really hard, like Starship Hector and Star Force were really, really tough. And Last Starfighter for me. It also depends how you play a game. Like when I played Ikari Warriors, that one's very, very challenging if you don't use the ABBA code, which I didn't let myself use because my rule was if the game itself or the manual or something that came with the game told you about a like continue code, then you were allowed to use it. But if the game didn't tell you about the continue code, you weren't allowed to use it. So Ikari Warriors has no mention of that code in the manual or anything else that came with it. So I made myself play it without the code, and that one took a couple months to learn because there's a lot of hidden objects in that game, and the controls are so slow. It's really tough to, like in Gradius, when you die, people kind of have that, like, it's so hard to get going again because you got to build up your character. Mm-hmm. Ikari Warriors is 100 times harder in that regard. Like when you die, depending where you die, if there's no power-ups to like increase your walk speed or your shot range right away, like it's almost impossible to recover in some of those situations. And then like one that nobody really talks about, Miracle Piano, because it's not technically a game. You have to literally learn to play the piano, and there's like 40 some odd lessons in there. So that one took me months and months to do because I don't play piano, so I had to kind of learn from scratch.
Do you now play piano?
I can a little bit. I played for about a year. We bought a piano at our house, and my son and I goofed around on it a bit. So I've got the basics down. I'm still like a beginner level, but yeah.
Did the game actually like kind of set you up like, oh, okay, I got it now?
I don't think it's a good teaching tool because there's some programming errors and glitches and stuff in it that make it just nonsensical. Mm-hmm. I played music in high school back in the day. So I knew how to read sheet music and stuff already, which was a huge help. That got me through the first half of the game really, really quickly. And then the last half, we actually had to learn more complex songs and rhythms and stuff. It took me a long time to wrap my head around those parts of the game.
So I'm actually surprised. I mean, maybe you're just really, really good. But like, I feel like if I went through every, if my goal was I'm going to beat all these games, there would have to be at least one, probably several, where I was like, I just can't do this. Like, did you ever kind of run into, I'm never going to beat this game?
Yeah, a couple times. Akari Warriors, like I mentioned, that one. So you said at the top of the show, like I didn't use any cheats. Everything was all on original hardware, and that's absolutely true. There's one kind of caveat to Akari Warriors where I was having so much trouble trying to memorize that game that I bought the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection, which has the NES Ikari Warriors on it. And I put a save state on the start of stage 3, because there's 4 stages in that game. And every morning I would wake up and I'd play through stage 3 and 4. And then I'd go back to my NES and I'd get really good on stage 1 and 2. And then so the practice with the Switch version was so that when I finally got to stages 3 and 4, I didn't have to like learn them from scratch there. I could like kind of know the layouts a little bit. So I did use that one outside source to help me get through it. And then after I practiced those stages, I did it all on the NES hardware.
I think that's totally legit. I mean, it's just practice, and then you did the real thing.
Yeah, that's it. I was okay with it like that. It's just, I know a lot of other guys like TMR, when he did his, he'd do like emulator practice. And I just feel weird about that. So I didn't do any emulator practice, but I did something very similar for Ikari Warriors.
How, using original hardware, like I have a Super Nintendo because that was kind of my baby as a kid, but, you know, it's on its last legs. I have to literally, like, insert a credit card to make, like, the games work. Mm-hmm. So how do you keep your stuff in working condition? Like, have you had to repair it at all?
Yeah, well, working at the game store, I got very used to doing repairs there. So yeah, I've put new pin connectors in. I've refurbished old pin connectors. I actually have 2 NES systems ready to go. One with the lockout chip disabled and one without. And then I've had games where I've had to like clean them, scrub them down, replace battery saves, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I make sure everything's functional. Same with controllers, keep them clean and operational.
Have you ever been in the middle of a run and a game just conked out on you?
Yeah, I've had some games where like they needed a really good cleaning before I started, and then like halfway through the game they would start glitching out and like have weird artifacts all over the screen, and just became so I couldn't see what I was doing and I had to like start over again. But thankfully never in a very high stress situation. It's been in pretty simple ones to restart, like games that have a password save or something like that, so I can just go back to my last furthest area.
And similar to the what's the hardest game question, what game do you think nobody's ever heard of or played that they absolutely must?
I missed out on a lot of computer games when I was a kid. So some of the computer ports actually really surprised me. If you're a Commodore 64 kid, this isn't a hidden gem, but the game Mule has an NES port, and it was crazy interesting, where you have to like pick land plots and like have this weird economic system, but you have to make sure you can't just blow out your opponents, because you have to have a certain profitability between everybody to survive. So you have to prop everybody up a little bit, but you just have to be a little bit more than them. And I thought that was really fascinating. The AD&D game Pool of Radiance kind of blew my mind too. Same with Quest of the Avatar, the Ultima game. I really just assumed like, oh, these are old computer games, like they're going to be so dry and dull, but both of those were so far ahead of their time with like the open world setting and the decision making. Quest of the Avatar, I think, still has like one of the most unique endings of any game I've ever played in my entire life. And here's a hidden one that I don't think anybody knows about. It's called Overlord. It's a real-time strategy game on the NES. And it actually functions really good. And if you take the time to learn how the systems work, it's really fun.
Okay. Why do you hate pirates?
They're just gross. Like they're not appealing to me in any way. I kind of just a little pet peeve. Yeah, when people want to watch like Pirates of the Caribbean or get into like Assassin's Creed Black Flag or stuff like that. Like I don't get the appeal. It doesn't make sense to me why people want to be a pirate or want to see pirates do pirate things. They're just terrible.
You're also not a fan of digital releases.
True. Very true.
I mean, do you see any use for them, or you just want them gone completely?
No, they obviously have a use, and I wouldn't begrudge anybody for thinking differently than me. but I'm obviously the type of person who will play a game that's come out 30 years later and find it interesting. And with digital stuff, like unless they're pirated after to bring pirates back into this, like they're kind of unplayable. Like I can't, like with how the new Xboxes are at the online requirement, at some point in the future, the servers are going to go down and I can't just stick a game in the Xbox and play it. I mean, I have to do some kind of workaround through pirating sources. So I just prefer to have something physical in that means. And also, like we were talking about downsizing the collection, at least my physical stuff has a little bit of value. I can trade it, I can lend it, I can sell it. I can't do any of that with digital stuff right now.
Right. But I mean, the reverse of like servers going down, you know, unless like yourself, you're very good at repairing, you know, this physical copy has a shelf life as well.
It does, but it won't be in my lifetime. As long as I have some minor repair skills, I can keep it going. And that's for someone 100 years from now to figure out.
Fair enough. I need to ask about, I'm confused. So according to the Twin Galaxies website, you still hold the record for time and points in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but according to your own bio, it says it's a briefly held record. So what's going on here?
So yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a game that I grew up with, and I was just looking for, I'm like, what would be cool to hang in my game room? I'm like, how about a certificate that says you're the best at Ninja Turtles signed by Walter Day? Because the King of Kong movie had just come out, so I'm like, that'd be fun. So I've spent a few months kind of mastering that game and getting the record in the time. And then I noticed the score record kind of sucked. So I'm like, I could beat that too. And I slammed that out in like a weekend. Since then, Twin Galaxies really nobody cares about anymore in terms of recording records. They've kind of lost a lot of credibility. So people use like speedrun.com or I'm blanking, but there's Speed Demos Archives. There's a few other sources that people use now. So that record has been like absolutely destroyed. Like normally in speedrunning terms, you're talking about like seconds, maybe a minute cut off is like a big jump. I think the record's like 4 minutes under what I had at the time. And there's more of a community learning about new tactics and stuff that I wasn't aware of at the time. So yeah, it's been totally destroyed, but it was fun, and I have a certificate at home.
Were you ever like, were you kind of the pioneer of getting people going with that particular game speedrun? Did anyone come to you for advice?
No, not at all. I just did it because there wasn't a lot of competition. Because when I was thinking of that, I wanted that certificate for my game room. I was like, man, like I love Mega Man. I'm like, whoa, there's like dozens of amazing players playing Mega Man. Like that's going to take me a long time if it's even possible for me to do that. So I purposely picked something without a lot of competition at the time. And since then, I think people have realized like that's another one of those games that has that aura around it in terms of difficulty. I think people have realized it's not quite as bad as it has a reputation for being. So a lot of people have picked it up for speedrunning and just found out really cool things about the game that I didn't know at the time.
You started gaming on the Atari 2600, as did I. Atari Junior for mine. But
nice.
Why the NES? Was it just this was the thing that resonated most with you? Like, why not do an Atari full catalog?
Just for starters, I don't think there's a person on the planet that has a full Atari catalog. That's a really hard one to define. More importantly, though, there's no real ending to a lot of Atari games. They're like high score based for the most part. So you could play like a couple loops of a level and you'd kind of move on. It would be a very different task than the NES. And I don't quite have the same nostalgia for it. I love video game history, so I love revisiting Atari stuff and just seeing what games were like at the time. But when I was a kid, it was kind of like, I guess I'd equate it to like a board game night. Like we'd pull it out when a couple people were over, we'd play it for a couple hours, have some laughs, and then it would go like back under the couch kind of thing. Whereas when I saw the NES for the first time, it was a lot more like, oh, this is something I can do by myself. There's these cool stories, these neat characters, these crazy adventures. And so it kind of clicked with me in a way that the Atari didn't at the time.
Games with high scores and no real ending, I mean, that came up for your NES run often enough. And I enjoyed, I think it was again on the Drunk Friend podcast, you described how you decided what meant beating those games was like, well, I've seen the whole game, like I've played every level.
Yeah. Those ones don't have a really defined win condition. You're not like getting a credit roll or a blast boss or anything. So I had to make up my own idea of what that meant. So in a lot of games, it was like see all the content. So it was like once different background sprites started repeating, like that was a good point. Or different enemy types. When's the last enemy type introduced? I have to at least beat that level. Some weird ones like kicks was an interesting one because I just assumed like I'm going to beat the high score. But then I found out way later, and I had to revisit it, that after you beat a level, there's a slightly different musical cue that you get as a reward. So I'm like, that kind of counts as new content. So I've got to hear all these musical cues. So I had to go, I think, 10 stages in that one to hear all those. And then there's some like gray area ones too, like Urban Champion. I think most people would call that done when you just like beat 3 stages and it loops back to the same kind of fight. But if you keep doing that again and again and again and again, I think like 140 some odd times, I think it was, it actually changes your rank to champion. And then it never changes to anything other than that. So I'm like, well, it's in the title of the game, champion. So I'm like, that feels like they put it there intentionally. But it also feels like an afterthought because they don't even have the stage numbers go that high. Once you get to a certain point, they start going like A1, A2, B1, B2, and so on. So I was like, I just felt like I had to do it for the sake so no one can call me out on it. So I had to, Urban Champion ended up being a lot harder the way I played it when I revisited it. Because normally anyone could beat that game in 5 minutes if you're just doing 1, 2, 3. Very simple. But if you have to grind out like an hour and a half run of that game with only 3 lives and you can't earn any more in there, so you have to do the whole hour and a half on just the 3 lives, it's pretty tough to figure out the AI and not make mistakes for that long time.
Have you ever had, random internet trolls, I guess? Has anyone ever given you guff? Like, I don't think that's considered beating it or anything like that?
No, but I'm constantly terrified they will. So I made sure to do like expert mode when it's available, or do all the multiple loops, or really try and make sure that no one can come at me with that kind of stuff in most cases.
Before we get to the book, another publication, you're a contributor to NES Pro magazine, which I believe is about to launch its 2nd issue.
Yeah, that's right. I think they ship this month, the second issue.
What can we expect?
So in that one, I got to think, because they shuffled some of my articles around. Which one's in that one? I think I do an article in that one about the term NES hard, and how it came about and what it means, because I think it's really a badly defined term. If you like just Google it and like pull up the Wikipedia or something, they give a description of it, and then they give a list of games that they would consider NES hard. And those don't match. The description does not match what games are in the list. And I think people just use it colloquially so much that they've never really sat down and thought about it. So yeah, I had a really good time kind of talking about how games are NES hard, what I think that should mean. And I think I've got a pretty good grasp compared to the normal game player about which games are hard, what makes them hard, because there's been games where I've had to like research to figure out how to beat because I couldn't figure them out on their own, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So NES Pro, like, that was kickstarted initially. Can we expect, is it going to be a long-term publication, or how many issues do we know?
I hope so. I'm just a contributor there. I'm not one of the guys running it. I'm just a writer, so I can't speak to the business side. But I know they've got plans for a couple of years worth of stuff at least, and I assume they'll keep adding to that as time goes on if it keeps being successful.
And then your book, which you've been pretty hush-hush about. I've seen you say, I can't say much at this point. So I'm gonna try and get what I can out of you.
Okay.
Well, I mean, can you tell us what this book is about? More than just NES.
I'm not supposed to say much about the specifics. So what I can say is it's going to cover the whole North American NES library in a way that I've there's no other book that covers it that I'm aware of like that. I feel I do have a certain level of expertise in terms of the game playing. So that's going to be a huge focus of the book. It's going to be monstrous, like textbook size, I think, when we're done here. And I'm hoping I can talk much more publicly and open about it in this month, in December. Would be wonderful, because I really like being transparent. I don't like being hush hush. So I find it frustrating because I really, really want to answer this question with a lot more specifics.
Well, that's, I don't want to get you in trouble. So,
yeah, I don't want to get me in trouble either, because I would like to do more projects like this in the future. So I gotta make sure I walk the line here. I'm really excited about the cover art. We've commissioned this artist that I really love. So I think that's going to turn out really well too, and I can't wait to share that with everybody hopefully soon.
Can you tell us how far along, how much work you've put into it so far?
Oh yeah. So like I said, I'm going through the whole library and I'm revisiting every game to make sure I'm getting all my facts straight. So as of this recording, I think I've got about 160 games left to go. So I've done a majority of that writing. And then once all the game writing's done, there's a few other sections I need to flesh out too. We're going to get some guest writers to chime in on specific games as well. So we need to get that. So I'm hoping in maybe January, the whole book will be totally complete. And then we can start doing all the editing and layout and that kind of stuff.
During your revisit, was there any game that you were like, wait a minute, I don't remember doing this or seeing this? Like something that you just... I have a whole other thing to explore here. Yeah,
kind of. Like some of these games were 10, 9, 11 years ago. So memories faded a bit. And some of them are so unnoteworthy that they just kind of blend together. Before I revisit them, if you would have put like Twin Eagle and Twin Cobra next to me and showed me screenshots, I probably couldn't have identified which one was which. Since they're both like helicopter shooters. They're both pretty generic, same color schemes. So yeah, some things were fun to revisit to jog my memory, because when you're going through games at that rate too, unless something really stands out about them, I'm only spending, in some cases, like the one playthrough takes 1 to 5 hours, and that was 10 years ago. So it's not a huge impact on my life. So I don't remember all of them super, super well. So I'm really happy I revisited them to refresh myself, because if I just tried to go on memory, it would have been a lot of holes there.
Obviously, to play every homebrew game would be impossible, because they're coming out all the time, and how do you even get a hold of some of them? But are you interested in all, like, there are new NES cartridges being made. Is that something that you're into?
I haven't kept up, but I did get a couple years ago. I know the developer of Assimilate, that was pretty early NES homebrew, and so he sent me a signed copy, and I played through that. I think that one's up on my YouTube. And in my podcast, we interviewed the developer of what was the game called? Nomalos, which was an old NES homebrew. So I grabbed that one and played through it too. I think that's up on my channel. I used to keep up with them more when Nintendo Age was still alive, because I was pretty invested in those forums, and so a lot of the early homebrew guys were on Nintendo Age because they were like trading development tips and stuff like that, and promoting their games, because that was like the biggest market for their game was all like right there. But since Nintendo Age imploded, I really haven't focused on homebrew anymore. I kind of lost touch with that. So I'm not against trying it, but like you said, it would be impossible to keep up with everything. There's been so many, and most of them are like one print run and then they're done, because they just can't afford to keep things in production, or there might not be demand for it after the first run. So yeah, acquiring them after the fact is challenging and expensive.
Cool. Well, Kelsy Polnik, people can check you out on Collector Cast. That is the podcast. Your Twitter handle is Kelsy, Kelsy, Polnik, Polnik. And you are 2000 Crabmaster on YouTube. YouTube.com/@2000, like the number, Crabmaster. Kelsy Polnik, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for inviting me. It was fun.